Well, good morning, Chris. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Good morning, Will.
Chris Litterwick is probably one of the most well-known jazz musicians that we have here in Australia, who has had a long and distinguished career playing with the cream of Australian and overseas artists. So what we're going to try and do in this interview today is just to hear a little bit about Chris's life in music. So, Chris, the first thing I'd like to just sort of touch on with is tell us a little bit about your early background and how you got interested in music.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And my early background. The earliest memories I have are my mum singing me to bed at night. And now I can't remember this next bit, but Mum told me later that she used to sing and purposely go sharp or flat, to see what I'd do, and I'd pull her up and say, no, that's not right. And I don't remember that bit, but Mum told me later that that's what I used to do.
Yeah. So at a very early age, your ear was telling you what was the right things.
Yes.
So, did you have any formal training as a musician?
I learned piano for about 3 years, from the age of 7 to 10 or so, and then I started to get a bit slack on practice. There were so many other competing things. I was playing cricket and swimming and all that, at school, and so my dad said, well, if you're not going to put the work in, I'm not going to pay good fees for me. And unfortunately, I should have taken that as a cue and then practiced a bit more assiduously and kept going.
Yes.
Because now I think that was a huge mistake. I've been a lot better technique-wise, and because I'm all self-taught.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So you started on a piano. So did you have any? Where did the interest in jazz come in?
Probably when I was about 13. I had actually my parents, my grandfather and all that. They were heavily into classical music, and I grew up with classical music, and I'm still passionate about classical music.
Yeah.
When I was 13, we lived in Colombo, and an older cousin of mine came to board with us because he was going to school in Colombo, and he brought his collection of jazz LPs at the time.
Yep.
And there were mainly people like Sarah Vaughan and Eddie Condon. He had a couple of Louis Armstrongs there. And he used to sit in front of the record player, and he'd be his eyes shut, and he'd be swinging his head, and tongue hanging out and all that stuff. And I was fascinated just watching him, and I just suddenly got the bug from him about jazz. And,
yeah. So that was the first start. So did you get to play jazz at all with your limited piano ability at all? What?
I used to try and play a little bit on the piano, and
yep.
And then there was a little trio that I got together with a friend of mine who actually now lives in Canberra, Pip Sansoni. He played saxophone.
Yep.
And he was about a year older than I was, and much more experienced in jazz. He'd gone to school in England and come back.
Yep.
And so he knew all about Humphrey Lyttelton and all these people, in England. And he, and then with a drummer, we used to just get together and fool around,
Yep.
But very, in a very amateur way.
Yeah. Were you reading off charts, or
No,
it was all just off the top of your head?
Mm-hmm.
So it must have been. Did you do any professional gigs
No,
at all?
no, not with that trio. They're just just fun, get together and have a jam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, are there any other musicians in your family and your siblings?
Yes, Dad was a very, very good pianist, but I inherited his harmonic ear,
Yes.
to my eternal
Which is
gratitude.
yeah, exactly.
And he could play anything by ear on the piano. You know, he just had to listen to something and be able to play it. And I learnt my early improvising on the piano by just looking at and hearing Dad. And
Yeah, and
yeah,
just harmonically being able to do it. Yeah, well, that's a huge advantage. And what about your other brothers and sisters?
Um,
Any music?
my
there?
younger brother Jeff is a very, very good guitarist, and he used to sing folk
Right.
music
Yeah. So.
while he was working. You know.
Yeah.
And I sang, had a folk group in Geelong with, it was called The Group when that book came out, you know,
Yep.
that controversial book about
Yep.
The Group. So we called the group, this was The Group, and it was a 5-piece, 5 singers, 2 guitars, I was playing bass,
Yes.
and we all sang, and it was like something like the Idlers 5, but singing Peter, Paul and Mary and
Yes,
Joan
yeah.
Baez stuff. And we used
Yeah.
to sing at the folk club in Geelong.
Right.
This is
Okay.
when I was about 18,
Yeah.
19 probably.
Right. So, just to skip a little bit with the history of it,
Yeah.
then. So, when did you come to Australia?
Uh,
How old were you, and when
I
did you
was
come?
just 18 actually, yeah.
Yes. And what year was that?
That was 62.
62. So, and the family settled. You settled in Geelong.
Yes, Dad was an academic, you know, he taught maths, physics and Latin at 5th and 6th form, or
Yep.
in those days leaving
Yep.
and matriculation.
Yep. Yep.
And so we got a job at a boarding school in Geelong,
Yeah.
Chanel College. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and I had started my A levels back in Ceylon, so I came out here. The first year, it was too late to join school because it's middle of May or something when I got here. So I worked for the rest of that year, which was really interesting because I worked in process lines in factories, and I got to know the real dinky-die Australian guys, you know,
Yeah.
and try and cotton on to this strange pronunciations and the local colloquialisms and
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Were you was your entry into Australia an easy one?
it was easy, but we had to go through quite a process to do it because that was still the White Australia policy in those
Yes.
days, you know.
Yeah.
And we had to have an interview and trace our lineage back to show that there was 70% white or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Going back to, because I've got Dutch, English and German
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Sri Lankan, everything in the mix.
Yes. Yeah.
So we had to show that on the paternal line at least.
Yeah.
You could go back to
Yeah.
1700 or something.
Yes.
you know,
Yeah. And did you find adjusting to life in Australia after having grown up in Sri Lanka? Was that difficult? Or?
No, not really, no. Because I had some other relations that come out before my uncle.
Right.
Mum's brother, elder brother Bertram, he was
Yeah.
a lawyer, so he
Yeah.
came out earlier, and I spent
Yeah.
a lot of time
Yeah.
with him, and he showed us around and
Yes.
told us what
So you
was
sort of
what.
settled in. So, when you started playing locally
Mhm.
here in Australia, did you start on the bass or the trombone?
Both.
Both.
Yeah, and this was an amazing thing. I always wanted to play trombone back in Ceylon and double bass, but they were very rare instruments to get hold of, you know, and and there were not really any good teachers there anyway. But when I did my matric at Chanel College the next year in '63, and the director of music, Father Cox, and in the music room there was a spare trombone and a spare bass, and no one was playing it. I said, "Oh, can I take these home and just play with them? And if you need them, I'll bring them back." He said, "Sure, yeah."
So you really started on both of them,
both
sort of
together, yeah.
just playing around with
Just
them.
playing along with records, and
Yeah,
and that's the way we used to learn in those days.
yeah. You
Yeah.
just picked it up and did it. It's extraordinary. So when you look today, do you still equally like playing both those instruments?
Yes.
You do. Yeah. That's terrific. It's very unusual to have somebody like you that has got great facility on two very, unrelated instruments. So it's,
Although they're both supportive instruments,
yeah,
and they're both playing important harmonic parts in the mix of jazz, So.
yes. Or you know when they're not there when you listen to music, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Those bass on there. So in Geelong, now, who were the first contacts with jazz musicians that you came across?
There was a fairly amateur sort of band called Crescent City Jazz Band, and when I finished my matric, I did electrical engineering at the Gordon Institute of Technology there, which was really, really great institution. And there were a couple of musicians who was doing chemistry and other courses there, who were playing in this Crescent City Jazz Band, and I used to go along and sit in with them and probably play at the Gordon Gaieties, the annual show that they used to put on.
Yep.
But the first really good professional musicians I got to know were people like Frank Johnson, who used to play in Torquay and Anglesey at the time.
Yep.
Owen Yateman.
Yep.
Vern Delecki and all those guys. John Hughes.
Yep.
Lovely trumpet player who died unfortunately very young.
Yep. Yep.
George Barbie.
Yep.
All Geelong people.
Yep.
And Lockie Thompson then was
with the Whispering Gold Orchestra.
Yeah, Lockie was in the army, and he was a major, and he was doing staff college training at Queenscliff.
Right.
To become a colonel or something,
Yeah.
And I was playing then. Actually, at that time, I was playing with Des Cam at the Grovedale Hotel.
Yeah.
The early Grovedale Hotel, which was and it was in the paddock, It's old ramshackle old building, which goes back to about 1850 or something.
Yeah.
And Lockie used to come down from and sit in with Van sometimes from Queenscliff, just down the road to Grovedale, and that's how I got really into playing with bands that Lockie organised.
Yeah.
Because I was actually running a thing called the Geelong Jazz Festival.
Yes.
At that time, with people like Roger Peelby and Ian Coots and.
Yep. Well, that ran for quite some years.
That went for about 6 years. Yes.
Yes.
My wife Marilyn was. She was on the committee. We weren't married then. She was the treasurer.
Right.
And and so I put a band together there called the Lockie's Friends, and I had Mal Jennings on trumpet, and myself and Lockie in the front line, and Dave Campbell on piano, and Jeff Thompson on sousaphone.
Yeah.
And who was on banjo? Can't think. Ah, yes, Peter Allen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that we actually cut some acetates from that. East Recording used to actually record these festivals.
Yeah.
So I think it might be something here in the library.
Yeah.
And that went so well that Lockie decided to put a band at the Australian Jazz Convention in Hobart that year.
Yep.
And he called it the New Whispering Gold Orchestra.
Yep.
So that was start of a new Spring Gould progression through the years, and it became slightly bigger. There were 2 trombones and 2 trumpets.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Were
3
you
saxes.
playing bass or trombone?
Trombone.
Trombone.
Mm.
Yeah, that was the one. Well, that's good. And I remember that you got involved with New Faces at one stage, didn't you?
That's right. Mal Jennings used to live in Ballarat, and he had a coffee lounge there, and we used to love going up and listening to his group. You know,
Yep.
drive up to Ballarat to listen to Mal Jennings. And who was it? Mal's brother Herb had put together a jazz band to play at New Faces.
Yep.
And I was on bass in that band. And we won the local heats. We won the local finals and went into the national heats and became second to Paul Hogan.
Yeah.
In that. And in the national finals, Paul Hogan came second again. No, Paul Hogan won the heats actually.
Yeah.
We came second. And in the national final, we came fourth or something.
Yeah.
But Paul Hogan came second to a young female cellist, you know, and I think she's probably
Yep.
not playing music anymore. And Paul went on to great heights from there.
Yeah. Yes, he certainly did.
Mm.
That was good. Now, your first serious band that you really led yourself was probably the New Harlem, wasn't it?
New Harlem, yes.
So, do you want to talk to us about that?
Yes. Yeah, I was doing some extra study at, and when we got married, we lived in a flat in Caulfield, and he used to come around and want me to join the New Harlem, and my wife Marilyn said, "No, come on, you're doing this course now. You're doing some. You know, you need to just make sure you finish that part of your life first before you try get distracted, because I get distracted easily by music."
Yeah.
So I kept saying no, but eventually I went along and joined the New Harlem.
Was that on bass or
No,
trombone?
I hardly played bass actually until much later.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was all trombone in those days. So where did the New Harlem play?
The New Harlem, we used to do lots of private gigs and
Yeah.
festivals.
Did you have a regular?
We did, yes. The law partner of my uncle, his stepson, ran the complex called Athol's Abbey and Case of Bananas, Casa
Yep.
de Banana.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the corner of Park Street and St Kilda Road.
Yep.
And Frank Trainer used to play downstairs
Yep.
at the Abbey, and I think the Yarra Jazz Band played as well.
Yep.
Yarra's, I think, played Thursday nights. Frank played Friday and Saturday nights, you know. And Frank used to put the New Harlem in there quite often when he went away, because just to fill in while he did some huge paying gig in the
Yeah.
in the provinces or the countryside.
Yeah.
And we got much better reactions than Frank. And George, the Hungarian chef, who was actually the manager of that complex which Glenn LeBroy was running, a friend of the family and knew me and all that. He let George make all the decisions to run Athol's Abbey, and George said, "I want you boys here." You know, I said, "I can't do that. Frank is a friend of ours, and you know we wouldn't take somebody else's gig just like this." He said, "Well, I'm going to sack them, so it'll be open." I said, spoke with everybody, and I mentioned to everybody, and they all had the same reaction as I did. You know, we can't muscle in here. But then when George said he sacked the band anyway.
So how long were you? How long were you there for?
we were there for quite a while, from 80, what am I saying? From about 74 to about 82.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I went to England in 82 with my career.
Yep.
And the band kept playing there, but then they changed their name to Radio Days.
Yep.
But they didn't last. I think they finished around about early 82.
Yes.
And when I came back from England, George rang me and said, no, it wasn't George. It was Glenn LeBroy that rang and said, look, this building is going to be pulled down and they're going to build some monolithic thing of stone and glass and concrete and all that, umpteen stories high, but we've got 6 months left, and can you put a band together? And I was playing. I had a band playing at the Prahran Market for ages.
Yes, yeah.
Before I went to England, and there was myself, Smithy on trumpet.
Yep.
Dave Hetherington on clarinet.
Yep.
So that was the front line.
Yep.
Cal Duffy on washboard.
Yep.
Pip Event on tuba.
Yep.
And Tony Orr on the banjo.
Right.
So I thought, well, I'll put a band together with the front line of. I'll put the whole band in together, the Prahran Market band, and call it something else.
Yes.
But Ian Smith was already playing, so he wasn't available on Friday and Saturday nights. Dave Hetherington was also not available, but the rhythm section was. So I thought, okay, who am I going to ask? And I heard that Peter Gordian was at a bit of a loose end because Blues Express had finished their gigs and wasn't playing anymore, that much. So I asked Peter, and he said, okay, yeah, I'll do it, but probably just for the 6 months, because I'm starting a new venture in the city, and that'll be it then, because I'll be doing this other thing. And he suggested, well, Richard Miller's available as well from Blues Express. I said, well,
yep.
I knew Richard anyway, but I said, fantastic, okay, well, so that was the start of Society Syncopators, playing at the Abbey.
Yep. Right.
Yeah. And when the next year came, we finished there, and I went down and spoke to Ruth Blake, who's running the Emerald Hotel, and said, look, we've just finished there, and we had built up a huge following, and he was really rapt, because he was a jazz fan, he played the trumpet. So that's how we started at the Emerald. Yeah.
The Emerald's had a great history. For those who don't know about it, the Emerald's in Clavenden Street, South Melbourne, and it's still producing jazz, and you're still playing.
Still playing there, in a different guise. I'm playing double bass with Joe Stevenson's Rockets.
Yes, yep. Well, that's certainly amazing. So, with the Prahran Market Jazz Band, were you sort of like wandering minstrels?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, what sort of reception did you get there?
Oh, it's amazing, yeah. And the way, actually, can I just tell a little anecdote of how it started there? I had a lot of contacts at Telstra, and my sister was working fairly high up in the admin area there,
Yep.
And I got the call to put, every time they opened a new Telstra shop, to play some music for a couple of hours in the street, while they had the official opening and all that.
Yep.
And the Telstra shop right opposite the Prahran Market we played there, and I said, let's just take a walk through the market just for the heck of it and just play, walk through and play, which we did. And the manager saw us and heard us, and after he came across, then we went back to play across the road, and he came across and said, and this was about end of November. He said, "What are you boys doing in December? Can you come and play every Saturday morning here till Christmas?" Yes, sure. And then in January, he said, "Well, guys are not doing anything on Saturday mornings, you've got the gig here. And they didn't have a gig like that before, so this was something new, where we played in the, started off in the what used to be the big square,
Yep.
circular area where people used to congregate and have coffee and all that, you know.
Yep.
And playing lots of families, so we'd start doing all sorts of tunes for the kids, like Bananas in Pyjamas and all that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And then, after having a coffee, we'd go through the meat market, and the guy there was a drummer,
Yeah.
so he used to get his cues and play along with us, you know. And he was really, really good. And this crowd would build up in the meat area, and the place would be some of the other stallholders must have been a bit frustrated that nobody could move in that meat.
Yeah.
People
Yep.
gathering around to see what we were doing.
Yeah.
Crazy.
What do you think it would be like if you turned up now?
It's not the same.
That it's moved on.
It's moved on, and it's lost some of that soul that it had at the time.
Yeah. That was a pretty special time.
Well, actually, sorry to interrupt, but we had Channel 7 come and film us there and did an interview with this phenomenon, you know.
Yeah. And
we had our picture on the front page of Melbourne's White Pages. Yeah. Crazy.
That's really funny. Chris, perhaps you might tell us a little bit about your time in England.
Mm-hmm.
When you were transferred over there for work.
Yeah. Well, that was a fantastic experience, actually, and I was very lucky to be chosen, because where I worked at the Aeronautical Research Laboratories, which had 600 people in, there was a technical staff who were actually in the workshops who make stuff, and then there were the scientists who devised the research programs, and then there were the engineers which I was one of them there, who would actually design the equipment for these experiments, which then would be made in the workshops or somewhere else, you know.
Yep.
Well, 2 people each year from the professional staff would be chosen to go to work in the USA or England to further their experience. And I was very, very fortunate one day that I was one of those people. So I was sent there for nearly 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
And whereabouts were you located?
I was working at the RAE, the Royal Aircraft Establishment, in Farnborough,
yes,
in England.
Yep.
And that's in Hampshire.
Yep.
And I lived just across the border in Surrey,
Right.
in Camberley.
Right.
So they shipped us all there, my 2 daughters and my wife, and they went to school there in Farnborough, and they loved it. They didn't want to go because they didn't want to leave their friends behind.
Yeah.
They didn't want to come back because they didn't want to leave their friends behind from England, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It was in there. So, did you have a chance to play with some of the jazz? Did you take your instruments with you?
Yes. Not the bass, no, the trombone. And I found out there was quite a bit of local jazz playing in pubs very close by.
Yeah.
So I played with a band, Tony Ashby, I think Tony Ashby's band. Not that well known, but they made a good sound, you know. And Cuff Billett, who is much better known, played in probably about 10 kilometers away in Guildford.
Yep.
Is it Guildford? Yeah, I think it was. Yes. Yeah, and Farnham. Sorry, not Guildford. Farnham. The Farnham Maltings on a Wednesday night.
Yes.
And that was a lovely gig.
Yeah.
So I used to go up there, and they used to always call me to have a sit-in, you know.
Yep.
And then they started getting a really well-paid gig, like playing at the Aldershot Army annual ball or something, you know.
Yep.
And they'd asked me to join them. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fantastic. And Alan Shipton, who had a jazz program on the BBC,
Yeah.
and he was young at the time, you know,
Yeah.
but very, very good writer. He's written books on jazz.
Yep.
He was the bass player in that
Oh.
band. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was, the jazz scene was certainly very alive and well in that particular time in the 80s, early 80s. Yeah, that's good. So when you came back, that was when you got back in and you started with the Syncopators, which is now chalked up, what, is it 40 years this year?
This is the 40th anniversary.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Amazing, yeah, for something that should have only lasted 6 months.
Yeah. Well, it's probably one of the longest running jazz bands in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, not sure about that, but yeah,
Well,
probably be up there. Yeah,
be up there with them. Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about some of your touring that you did with the Syncopators, because it really opened up in Australia, but also overseas.
Well, again, stroke of luck or serendipity or something, I don't know, but there were Australian jazz coordinators in each capital city who used to work for the Australian Arts Council.
Yes.
So they were tasked by the Department of Foreign Affairs to find a band, a traditional type jazz band, to be sent to do a cultural relations tour of Papua New Guinea.
Yes.
In 1989. So the coordinators were calling for submissions, you know, so I put, in those days, a cassette tape that we used to sell cassette tapes. I sent a couple of our cassette tapes that we made as the submission for the Society Syncopators at the time, and I wrote a screed about what we had done so far. And the jazz coordinators chose us out of 15 submissions. So
that was good. So where did it take you?
Where did it take?
Where did you go as the result?
In Papua New Guinea. That was to Papua New Guinea.
Yes.
And we were meant to do Bougainville as well, but then there were problems there at the time. There was an insurrection, so that part of the tour got shut down. Yeah. But we had an amazing time in Papua New Guinea. Actually, we were looked after by the embassy, and they coordinated everything, and played in Madang and Leh, and flew us up to Ok Tedi, where the BHP mines are. Yep. And we played, and that's something like a 3-hour trip in a light plane. Yep. Right up to almost on the border of going into east western Papua, is it? I'm not sure. Anyway, not that way. And the villages there, we played in villages, and we played for BHP. And, and the villages, they were gobsmacked, like we had come out from some people from outer space, you know. And they all the places that we went to in Papua New Guinea, they put on a ceremony called a Sing Sing, where they'd all dance, and you had to have a kava drinking ceremony with the chieftain and all that sort of thing, you know. And there'd be an exchange of gifts. So the embassy gave us suitable gifts to give to the chieftain and get something back in return. You know?
But they loved the music.
They loved the music, but they couldn't understand it because we invited one of their drummers to come and sit in with the band, you know, while we were playing. And he just didn't have a clue how to fit in. He was just doing his own thing, but it didn't work.
Oh, that's good. So apart from that, there you also did some tour of the major islands of the South Pacific, I think, really cool.
That's right. Yeah. So again, for the Department of Foreign Affairs,
right? Because
we got such a great reports back from the embassy and all that. You know, so these guys are fantastic. They've done all these beautiful cultural things and went out of their way to push and promote Australia. You know? So we were selected to do some tours the next year and the year after, and then the year after that, with the contacts we made, they were shutting down this cultural relations little funding, so that was disappearing fast. So we organized our own tour, the next one, and we went to Vanuatu and played for 2 weeks there at a resort.
Yeah.
We had played previously on one of the sponsored tours,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And also you went to Tonga?
Yes, we went to Tonga twice as part of the DFAT thing, and we got an official invitation, Royal Command performance at the King's Palace, the King of Tonga.
Right.
And we were invited then to sit down on a low table,
Yes.
sitting on the floor, and the table's about that high, like in Japan. And and they had, it was a luau type function, and they had suckling like piglets.
Yes.
In the traditional earth
Yes.
ovens.
Yeah.
And so we sat there, and the king was just 2 seats away from me, and the queen was sitting there, and we all had a great time. And then we did the concert first. We did a command performance of the king, just the king and the queen, just sitting there and played for them. Had lunch, and then they said, just relax, just walk around the palace, and so we walked around and sat and things, and felt like we owned the place for a while. They were delightful. Yeah.
Oh, that's really fantastic. And the other one that was special too is that I understand that you also had a chance to play for in Thailand.
That's right. Yes. The Consul General of Thailand was Dr. Simon Wallace. He was a dentist, and he was also married to a lovely Thai lady, and he had great contacts with the hierarchy up there, and King Bhumibol, the late king, was a jazz fan, and a reasonable clarinetist, but he was a much better composer. He'd written all these really, really nice tunes, and all the Thai people knew the tunes. They knew these tunes that the king had written in a jazz vein.
Yep.
So we learnt these tunes, and Simon had organised a thing where we actually played at in the palace and had an interview with the king. Only meant to go for about 10 minutes, because he comes down at 10 o'clock at night, and he used to play with his friends.
Yeah.
They just have a jam session on Saturday nights, you see.
Yeah.
So we did a concert for him. This is not the Syncopators. This is
Yeah.
a band that Simon, playing trumpet himself,
Yep.
put together. Ian Smith, Joe Stevenson, myself, Leon Hill was in that first
Yep.
group.
And did he play with you? Did he play in the group?
No, he didn't. No.
But he very much appreciated the fact that you'd taken the trouble to learn his tunes.
Oh yes, that was amazing. So after we finished playing, we went to have a 15-minute audience with the king, and the king would be on his sort of a throne, and Simon wanted to do the thing according to official protocol, rather than normally, as a jazz band, we'd go and sit down and talk to him like we're talking to you. But Simon said, we'll do it the proper way, and you have to have your head below the head of the king. So the king was sitting there, and we were sitting on the floor, and the 15-minute interview went for an hour, he had this twinkle in his eye, and he had a lovely sense of humour, so you could catch the faintest hint of a smile from the corner of his mouth, and he knew, he was making a little bit of a joke here.
Oh, what a wonderful experience for you. So you attended so many overseas festivals. over a period of time. How did you manage to fit that in with work, or had you retired at that stage?
No, I hadn't. No, all my long service leave and annual leave used to go on band trips. Yeah, poor family came second, unfortunately. But that's when I decided to retire. I took early retirement at 55, and I wanted to play music.
Right. So you've been virtually, full time since then.
Mm-hmm.
As much as all music was your
yeah.
passion and
it's
life.
not that I didn't like. I really love my job, and
Yes. Yeah. But
had some
it got in the way of your
yeah.
music a little bit. Yeah, that's good. So, what were some of the outstanding festivals that you went to?
Breda was the first
Yeah.
big international jazz festival.
Yeah.
And I remember that the fireworks were there that year as well, and they played in this huge hall called the Turf Strip or something. Holds 2,000 people, and we were the final band, and they were up in the balcony and sort of shouting out things that like, "Oh, go home!" It's being silly. No, they didn't really disrupt anything, but we could hear the odd calls coming from the fireworks guys.
Yes.
But anyway, and we got a standing ovation for that performance.
Yeah. That was fantastic.
2,000 people, amazing.
Yeah. Well, that must be. Does an enthusiastic audience inspire the band?
Definitely. Mm. Yeah.
You really sort of go to another level.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the band has a sense of humour. We're not sort of stiff and on stage, we can sometimes be a little bit ladder-kiddish as well.
Yeah, so it's on. So of the musicians that you've come with and played with over the years, which are the people that have really impressed you? Just probably dozens of them, but just are there any of them really that stand out?
In Australia, I would say Bob Bernard for sure. Len Bernard, Ken Heron.
Are these people because of just their sheer musical?
Yeah, they're just musicality.
Yeah.
Playing jazz.
Yeah. Just be able to.
And their facility as well, the instruments.
Yes, yes. And what about some of the overseas greats that you've played with?
Well, I managed to have a session with at an Australian jazz convention in Sydney. I played in a band, put together band with Bud Freeman.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was pretty young and I wasn't anywhere near their league, But the fact that I can say, well, I did play with Bud Freeman once.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Dick Carey as well, who played with Louis Armstrong and played piano with Louis Armstrong.
Yeah.
And played his alto horn, which he called.
Yeah.
With people like Eddie Condon and all that.
Yeah. So, who are the musicians that in your two chosen instruments on bass and trombone?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the people that have influenced your style? Have they?
Ray Brown on bass.
Yep.
Definitely. Quite a few people. I changed my preferences, my trombone preferences, as I kept getting older and getting possibly a little bit more discerning. I don't know. But in my teens, definitely Chris Barlow.
Yep.
on trombone.
Yep.
Then people like Roy Williams,
Yes.
beautiful player.
Yes.
And then meeting and playing with Dan Barrett,
Yes.
classic great trombone player from
Yeah.
USA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lovely guy. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think he came out for some of the Bob Bernard jazz
That's right.
parties, didn't
That's
he?
right.
Which you were involved with,
Mm.
I think, from
Yeah.
about 2002 onwards,
Correct.
wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, very fortunate at that time that John Trudinger was so good at organising, and the people that he brought out over that 10 years that he did those parties was just fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a sort of a passion of something he loved to do. You know, I don't think he made any money much from it.
No, I don't think he did, but he just made the things there with it. Now, you mentioned early on about your interest in grew up with classical music. So, have you done any other things in music apart from jazz?
I wasn't good enough to play classical music, so classical music is something I
Yes.
mostly listen to.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm 50-50, 50%
Yes.
of my passion is with classical and 50% with jazz.
Yes.
But I did sing as well, some
Yes.
light opera,
Yes.
the Gilbert and Sullivan,
Yes.
with the Savoy Opera Company for 20 years or so.
Yes.
And
So, is that once again self-taught?
I actually took some singing lessons
Oh.
with Brian Clough, who's
Yes.
a really, really good teacher of singing, and he was one of the directors of the Savoy Opera. So he used to give private lessons.
Right.
And that helped my trombone playing as well, because I learned how to use my diaphragm properly for the first time. Anyway, and with the singing, I also thought I'd go for an audition with the Melbourne Bach Choir. They were, and to my amazement, I was accepted to sing Bach's St. Matthew Passion.
Yeah.
No, not St. Matthew Passion. Bach's what is it? It'll come to me in a minute. And also Mozart's Requiem at St. Paul's Cathedral.
Yes.
With this, and these were all really, really great singers. You know?
Yes.
It took me about, I remember walking around Dendy Park with the music and just learning the thing, you know.
Yes.
And I got there.
Good. That sort of being involved in a big choir like that must be make the hairs tingle.
It's amazing, yeah. And
Yeah.
Bach's Magnificat.
Magnificent.
And
Yep.
and the Requiem.
Yeah, well, that's really good. Tell us about your involvement with the jazz conventions, because you've been to many of those, haven't you?
I used to go virtually every year, you know, when I was from about age of about 21 or something onwards. But then the family came along and it interfered with family Christmases and all that.
Yes, because
Yeah,
Boxing Day was,
yeah.
it was always very difficult.
So I only went then, after about 10 or 12 years of going every year,
Yeah.
only went to ones which were in Melbourne or close by, you know.
Yes, somewhere where you could do it. So, did those conventions play an important role in the development of jazz in Australia? In those early
in
years?
those early days, definitely. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Because there wasn't that many opportunities for festivals and that sort of thing, and it was really a coming together of musos and encourage young people to come in and sit in with bands and all that sort of thing, wasn't it? A great.
I had lots of great moments, you know.
Yes.
and great jams with people at jazz festivals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jazz conventions, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Chris, you've got this beautiful trombone there. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, this is S.E. Shire's trombone, a handmade US model, and I've had it for about 10 or 12 years now.
Yes. One of the things that I've always been intrigued about, especially in your situation, that you've chosen two instruments, that there's no frets, there's no fixed notes. So, how do you know where to move your?
Well, when I was starting to play, that was a conundrum for me, trying to work out how the thing worked. But it's got 7 positions: first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, sort of thing.
Okay.
And in each position, you get what's known as the fundamental tone and the overtones.
Yep.
So. So, the lowest note you can play on that position is the fundamental. The fifth in the scale series.
Yep.
And then it goes up in.
And you're doing that with your lip.
It's a combination of lip and the breath.
Breath.
Yes.
Right.
And the positions, sometimes you might have to humour the third or the fifth or the
Yep.
seventh or something, It's not exactly in the same position. This
Yeah.
might be slightly flat or slightly sharp.
Yeah. So very much an instrument for somebody who has got a good harmonic ear.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. Because I've seen you play, and you obviously are not thinking about any of that. You're
No, that's right. It's all muscle memory, and yeah.
Yeah. So it just happens.
Just happens.
Yeah.
A magic fairy is guiding my hand along.
Yeah. So before you said to me about that the trombone and the bass play an important part in the harmonics of the band. So can you just explain that a little bit more?
Well, take a 6 or 7 piece traditional jazz band, for example. The trumpet firmly is the person who plays the melody.
Yes.
Okay. And he might embellish it a little bit here and there, but he's stating the melody. The clarinet is doing little obligato runs and decorating, it's adding a bit of filigree here and there.
Yes.
The trombone is playing a supportive harmonic note below all that happening, and you can be very basic New Orleans trombone, or you can be a little bit more adventurous, and for someone like Jack Teagarden or Dan Barrett and all these people, and it could be a lot more adventurous. And the modern jazz musicians can be so adventurous that sometimes, I think it's being too adventurous for my ear. But
So whereabouts on the scale are you if with the lead note on the trumpet?
Mm-hmm.
Where does the trombone fit in with that?
Would be usually below it.
Right.
But sometimes it can be above.
Right. So
if you're doing an arranged phrase or run or something, it might be arranged that the sound would be a lot better if the trombone part was taking a harmony above the trumpet.
Right. Okay. So where does the bass fit into all that?
Well, it's the real power behind the band. If the bass is not playing the right notes, it's going to sound terrible. For that matter, any
so how do you know what's the right note?
Not playing the right notes. But well, it's got to be something that adds gravitas to that chord that's being played at
Right.
the time.
So
And it might be a fundamental, it might be the root note of the chord, it might be the fifth of the chord,
Yes.
and this is where your ear will tell you what will sound best for that.
for that particular.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where my listening to a lot of classical music has helped me in that regard, because I can hear the great composers and how they write their parts to things, and it's all part of that music.
Yeah.
Musical journey.
The harmonies of
Yeah.
it. It's a fascinating thing, and of course, when you're playing jazz tunes and you're doing it, without arrangement, you're doing this on the fly. There's no.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing.
If that's a jam blowing
Yeah.
band, but if it's a properly rehearsed band, you'll have rehearsed parts
Yes.
in the mix as well.
Yes.
Most of the solos would be improvised.
Yes. So it's quite amazing. Well, I think we'll all be, those who are watching this video will be really enlightened about it, that there's such capabilities of notes with this mysterious instrument here that was no fixed stops on it.
Yeah.
That's really good. Tell me, just as we sort of come to the end of it closely, have you got any thoughts about the future of jazz? You see jazz surviving?
In Australia or
Well,
worldwide?
Yeah.
Yeah, jazz will survive in some form or other. I'm just a bit worried about the classic jazz.
Yes.
There's once upon a time, we were all young, and that was the music which the people who used to come to jazz dances, the college kids and all that.
Yes.
Now, when the Beatles came on the scene and
Yes.
those college kids discovered this new music, nobody was going to go to a jazz dance. You need something. You need the young people to embrace that sort of music. If you're going to get a resurgence, for example, in classic jazz,
Yes.
And they're not going to embrace the music unless they hear it somewhere.
Yes.
And there's some places that we play at, for example, the Paris Cat in the city, where it's a much younger audience there sometimes, and people are there just to experience jazz. Some of them are there for the first time to listen to music, listen to jazz, and they love it, But that's just such a small percentage of the people of what's happening in the jazz world. So how can you get this move back to another jazz resurgence unless the young people are hearing it? It's too much.
And playing the instruments in
exactly.
that style. Melbourne is probably lucky that we've got several venues that support jazz and with it. And I know, do you attend or do you listen to any contemporary jazz music?
Yeah, I used to have what used to be possibly called contemporary at the time, Dave Brubeck and Oscar Peterson and Sonny Stitt and all these people. I don't go up into the ultra contemporary free-form blowing. Doesn't resonate with me, but I enjoy really good contemporary jazz.
Yes. Well, there's certainly many of the younger graduates of the improvisations at the College of the Arts and at Monash are technically absolutely brilliant, aren't they?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I had a quarter of that technique.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Is there, when you think in terms of the classic jazz, which is mainstream, is there a distinctly Australian sound? Has there been an Australian sound?
I think so, yes. Yeah. What used to be called the Melbourne Bounce.
Yes.
People like the Bells Brothers band at the time,
Yes. Yeah. And so if when you had, say, like the Bell Band, and they went to Czechoslovakia, you know, just after the war, and they were a sensation about it, and these were people who just learned mostly off 78 records, didn't they? That's where they
That's
did
right.
it. But they interpreted it in their own way. Yes.
But that Melbourne bounce is, I think Australian jazz has evolved, you know, from that period. So
Yeah.
I don't think there is a typical Australian jazz sound. No, it's a sort of a,
Yes. Well, I suppose it's good that there's so many Australian musicians that have done well overseas, haven't they? You know,
Oh, very well,
You
yes.
think of all the Australians that are playing in New York these days, for example.
some amazing musicians.
Yeah, there's certainly some wonderful ones around. Well, Chris, I think we've probably covered most of the story, and it's been a great pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thanks very much for asking me.
And putting together a record of your life in music. So thanks very much for coming, and we'll enjoy continuing hearing your wonderful music for as long as you can keep playing.
Well, I think that they carry me out, Mel.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Thanks a lot.
He's a trombone man in the band. Old Chris plays the trombone in the band. He lives in a little tiny wooden cabin. He's all the way from West Moorabbin.